Okay?
Yeah, make
Great.
death not so bad.
Right. Let's go on here and talk a little bit more about the patriarchal prison and what happens. Let's talk about this elk here. Elk is in nature, and we live in a patriarchal nature. It's part of the natural system of cause and effect. Although it evolves from one thing to another, like the sun during the day, wherever you happen to be on the planet, is up and is shining and giving light to your side of the planet. And automatically, if you stay in that same place, the sun will go down and night will come. Well, let's just say we're in the night right now. We're in the dark. But the sun is coming up with what they call the Aquarian Age, or the New Age of Enlightenment. You can give it any kind of name you choose to, but something has happened. Something is changing. We can go back to these Virginia Slim ads, and I hate to use those to the extent that I would hate to talk anybody into smoking because it's really bad for you. But I saw this one Virginia Slim ad in a magazine one time. It says, "You've come a long way, baby," and it talked about Dr. Bratt's mask. And what they used to do in the old days is they used to take the women, and they had this mask. If you caught your wife smoking, or she was smiling or talking or something like this in public, you'd put this mask on her, and the mask had straps over the top here and around the back here with a little padlock on the back. And in the 1800s, they really did put these masks on their wives. And what it was, is to bring them into conformity so that they would live this patriarchal system. Because the women weren't allowed to talk. They weren't allowed to laugh or smile. They were just to be there for the purpose of the male when he needed it or got ready for it, or whenever he wanted it to do whatever he wanted it to do. And we see a lot of changes took place in the last 100 years. The women were given the right to vote. Just 50 years ago, they weren't allowed to own land. Did you know that? They weren't allowed to have land. Maybe it's longer than that now. 60 years ago or so. They weren't allowed to hold land in their own name in some of the states. So great changes have come about in the consciousness here in the Western world. Although we see in some of the Mid-East countries like Iran and the Arabian countries, they still have the women with the mask on. It's a different type of mask. But they still got them behind the mask. And so a lot of change has come about here in the West. And what that is an ushering in of this Aquarian Age, or the sun rising on a new dawn, or an age of enlightenment, or whatever you would like to call it, as the sun rises and something else is ushered in besides the patriarchal prison. But this elk here, he's out in the forest. And you've heard the story about the day when the lamb will lie down with the lion. It's the same story. What this elk does is he goes out here and he goes over to the southeast corner of his property and he pees on it. And then he goes over here to the northeast corner of his property and he wets on it there. He goes over here to the northwest corner of his property and lets it have it there, and over here to the southwest corner and he pees on it there. And he marks out his territory. And he stands inside of his territory and he says to all the elks inside of there, he says, "Elkuses, gather on around here, and all other little baby elks." We don't have any bull elks in here because I'm the head bull elk and I make all the right rules and all the right ways, the way things should go. Now what I want to tell you here inside the territory is the divine law. God walks upon this ground. We have all the right religion, all the right rules, all the right ways, and God comes from this section of the planet. And as long as you don't cross the border here, you don't go across this border over here, that one there, or this one here, or this one here, all will be well and you will be taken care of and there'll be no problems. You're in the elk's kingdom, in the kingdom of God right here. And all the rules inside of here, this elk makes up. This is called the patriarchal system. He says, and the greatest sin that can be committed is to walk over here to the border and look across the border at another elk, another bull elk, He's telling this to the Elkuses and all the little baby bull elks. And he says, and the ultimate blasphemy or sin that can be committed is to go into another elk's territory. So, we don't want to go into another elk's territory. We don't want to look across the border. And it just so happens that there are all kinds of elk all over the planet telling the same story. Anybody ever heard this one before?
Called marriage.
Well, yeah, it's called marriage also. It's called religion. All the religions set up the elk's territory, and they say, we've got the right way, we've got all the right rocks, we've got the golden pebbles, we've got the right books, we've got the right words, the right leaders, and God rests here. And every religion is out there saying that, and they're all pulling the elk story on everybody. They're all telling them that God is within this book, or within these sayings, or within this building, or within this concept, or within this religion. Every one of them do that. And so what takes place is this thing builds up around individuals, and we call this egoism. And it's sort of like when you were talking about your dad. That's a real interesting story. When we're little kids, we go out into the playground, and we run into the other kids on the playground, and we get into some kind of scuffle with them, and they call us a name, and we feel real bad, so we go home, and we sit at home, and we talk to our parents about it. And so next day, we go back to school, and we start to pretend to be something that we're not. We say things differently. Excuse me just for a second. Anyway, back to the playground. We're out there, we're doing these things on the playground, so what we do is we go back and we pretend to be a little different than we were. We act like the group around us. We start wearing the clothes like those people are who are around us. We start to say the right words of the people around us. And what we do, because we're so sensitive inside and we get attacked, especially the kids in school, get picked on by the peers around them, that they build this tank around themselves. And by the time they get to be an adult, they go out into the world driving around in the tank, and there's this little tiny pink body in the tank. And everybody's got their own little tank. And they look outside the tank with these two little peepholes, and they got these levers that drive the tank, and they go driving through life in this little tank, and they come up to a friend or somebody else in society, and the other person drives, and they drive up here in their tank, and they say, hello! And the other one says, hello! And the other tank says, how are you? And this tank says, I'm fine! And this guy's probably doing real bad, but he says, I'm fine anyway, because that's what you're supposed to say, you know? Or they say in church, oh, how you doing? Wonderful day, isn't it? Everybody's happy. Let's shake hands and feel good and pretend to be happy. And so here everybody's sitting in their tank, and this tank here raises up his turret and goes, and shoots a big load of bullshit on this tank over here about how wonderful his life is and everything, and how great everything is, and if he were just doing what this tank was, everything would be okay. And so this tank goes, raises up his turret and goes, and shoots a big load of bullshit on this tank over here, and both tanks sit there with this bullshit all over them, you know, and they say, oh, that's life, you know, that's what life's all about, that's how we're supposed to be. And say, this tank goes off, and this one goes off, and they're out there in the world, extra bullshit on their side, shooting bullshit all over everybody, hiding inside of their tank, not telling how it really is, not really getting honest about life or what life is really about. They're not getting to the little pink body down inside. And they've got this great big, what we call the facade on themselves, or the tank in life. And everybody's pretending to what it be. And so we call this here, that's minimum security, this is medium security, and this is maximum security at the prison. But once you're locked up inside of your tank, it's real difficult to get out.